Welcome, friends, to the Media Roundtable. You know what we do here? We dive deep into the forces that are reshaping podcasting and audio and creator media in the service of the marketers who power it. I'm your host, Dan Granger. I'm the CEO of Oxford Road. And if I could set the scene for you, I want to tap into your theater of the mind, unless you're watching on YouTube, which we appreciate your support. But just imagine you're at sunny Austin, Texas, a couple weeks ago at South by Southwest at the Podcast Movement Evolutions space, which was at the Skybox. Okay, so this was like the first ever podcast movement. Used to bounce around, and if you're one of the initiated, you know that it was a big change this year, that it's now kind of folding into an extension of South by Southwest. So we had an awards show there. You might have heard about it, talking about independent creators and podcasters. And, you know, what we really wanted to do is shine a spotlight on the people who really built the industry. It is the independents that are the reason that you've ever heard of podcasting. And it's not necessarily the biggest platform, so we love them much, and they bring a lot to the table. The independent creators are the ones that really bet on themselves before anybody else and kind of self-selected into this. It's very much like the pioneers of this country, the people who really built this podcast ecosystem and just wanted that freedom. So we sat down with a few of them, and what we're doing today is we're going to actually give you the live broadcast of that conversation and let you hear directly from them about what it was like kind of building something from nothing, and really not just creating an audience and not just being a content creator, but really building a business. And the people that we spoke with are Hala Taha, who is a force of nature. If you don't know Hala, she is the CEO of Yap Media, that is Young and Profiting. And she hosts a very successful show, but she also runs a network. So she's running a business, and she is a creator, and she is doing it on her own. And we also have Jordy and Brett, that is 2/3 of the MeidasTouch network. These are two of the brothers, and they've really become friends of me and of the show and of the agency. And in both cases with Hala and with Jordy and Brett, they have an incredible track record of making ads perform well for brands. And so we get into how do they do it? And, you know, what are the costs of being independent to the creator? Like, what are the things they have to forego to do it on their own? And what brands get when working with them that they just can't replicate anywhere else, which I think is fascinating. So if you're a marketer and you're building something from scratch, or if you're just trying to affiliate with really raw, authentic voices who have a little bit of grit because they've really, through the school of hard knocks, found success. This is a great story and a great conversation to be a part of. Let's get into it. Thank you for being early for something that everybody who's joining me here for this discussion is also going to be a part of. It's a big day and a big night where we're really shining a spotlight on what I believe is the heart of this industry, and that is independent creators. It's great that we've got this little engine that could industry that is podcasting, and that it started as this pirate radio thing that was hard to explain to people, and there wasn't really infrastructure. But now it's getting a lot more corporate, and that's not a bad thing. In many ways, that's a good thing. But what is important, I think, for us at Oxford Road that doesn't get lost in this whole process is the importance of independence, because that's really the heart of what this industry is about. And not everybody is independent. Not everybody has full control over their show and their business and their destiny. And so what we wanted to do is, in our prior panel, we wanted to have a discussion with some of the brands about the value they see on the buy side of working with independent creators instead of just kind of the usual suspects. So now we're going to flip it around with this discussion where we're going to talk to some of the leaders who are independent creators kind of charting their own path about what that looks like. What are the costs? What are the benefits? And how that creates value for the rest of the marketplace. So if you would, please help me welcome some of the folks that we have on stage. The first person to my left is Hala Taha, who is the CEO of the Young and Profiting Network. She is a self-made entrepreneur and marketing expert. You can clap the whole bio all the way through. Keep it going. She started Yap Media as a side project and now doesn't just do a show. She runs a business that is pretty effective, and we're going to talk more about how she's gotten over 30 million downloads for what she's creating. Welcome to Hala. All right, now I got more to read, so hold the applause for a second. I got two brothers here that are like, you guys are like the Beastie Boys of creator media, I think.
I'll accept that comparison.
Will you accept that?
That's a cool comparison.
Okay, thank you. The middle child agrees. We've got two of the three brothers from the MeidasTouch network. Jordy is co-founder of the MeidasTouch network. He is an award-winning marketer and the head of brand and sponsorship for the network with his brothers Ben and Brett, who started this during COVID. And this show hit #1 in the country by downloads earlier this year. Give it up for Jordy. We also have Brett, also a co-founder of the MeidasTouch network. He is an Emmy award-winning editor. Came out of the Ellen DeGeneres show. We're going to have to talk about what you left on the cutting room floor sometime, but not here. He leads video production, digital engagement for the network, but they're all also part of the content. And so we're going to talk to them about, how they did it to start with. So why don't we start with you, Hala? Give us the short version of how this went from being a side project to when you realized this was going to be a full-time thing.
So I started Young and Profiting podcast 8 years ago while I was working corporate. And so I actually started my journey on LinkedIn and became an influencer on LinkedIn. I got really big there. I actually landed an interview with Matthew McConaughey while I was still recording in my mom's basement. And from there, it really took off. I got on the cover of Podcast Magazine. They called me the podcast princess because I started a podcast production agency that was growing really fast and understood how to grow and produce podcasts. And so I got that nickname. And then things really just took off from there. It's been 8 years. I've never missed an episode. And so it's just been a lot of consistency and hard work.
Jordy and Brett, give me a little bit of your origin story, how this thing came together.
It was 2020 during COVID. We were all watching the news, which was crazier with each and every passing day. And we were really kind of complaining to ourselves about it in our group chats at home, like what the hell is going on in the world right now? And we didn't know how to really put that energy into a productive and positive use. But we ended up building a network out of it. We decided, I'm sure there are other people who feel that the world is as crazy as we do at this moment. And so we built the MeidasTouch network, not really knowing where it was going to lead. We didn't have any followers or anybody. And we started doing the podcast, and we just started recording and getting stuff out there. And early on, the only listeners we had were our parents who liked the show, not really anyone else. And so it's a little soul crushing in the beginning, but we just grinded every single day. We all kind of had other jobs. Jordy worked in marketing. Our older brother, Ben, who's not here, was a civil rights attorney who represented Colin Kaepernick. I was an editor at the Ellen DeGeneres show, and I was working for a TV and film production company at the time. And we just all looked to each other and we were like, is there a way we could put our kind of weird, unique blend of skills together and do something to hopefully make the world a better place? And so the MeidasTouch Network was born, one follower, one listener at a time, just every single day, working really hard. I can't believe it is now almost 6 years later to the day. It both feels like we started this thing yesterday and 50 years ago. But that's basically the short version of the story.
Brett, do you remember the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like Hala, my first podcast or our first couple of shows, I was also in my mom's basement, so
yeah,
you can relate on that one.
Love it.
It's where all good ideas are born, in mother's basements.
I wanted to ask you guys, what was the moment when you realized that it was going to pay the bills? Like you could actually make a living on this thing?
I think the big thing for us is we actually never thought of it that way. We just really enjoyed what we were doing. We thought it was really important. We still think it's very important. We actually have never taken a second to honestly reflect. Like we just find ourselves in moments. 6 years later, all of a sudden we're on stage with you, Dan. This is nuts for us.
Yeah.
And so
I never thought that I could make money in podcasting. When I first started, I used to go on like Clubhouse and tell everyone, you can't make money on a podcast. Meanwhile, now my career is basically growing and monetizing other people's podcasts. So the first 2 years, I made $0. But by the third year, we started really monetizing the show. And then it's just been kind of growing super fast ever since then.
And so Hala, I mean, you kind of baked the business model and the mission right into the name, right?
Yeah.
And when did it cross over from being a show for you to being a network?
So 4 years ago, I started my podcast network. Essentially, I started a podcast and social media agency, and I grew 4 other podcasts to my size. I started then figuring out how to get sponsorships, and I never signed to a network, so I didn't know how it worked. In fact, Oxford kind of taught me the ropes because I would take calls with them and try to figure out what to do, how it works, what are the words that people use in the podcast network world. And I started getting us like traditional podcast ads, but I also really leaned into 360 campaigns. So monetizing across podcast, social, email, YouTube. And I really never had like a playbook. So I kind of just made my own rules, which is definitely an advantage of being an independent creator.
Well, and you had worked for some big corporations.
Yes.
Right. And you knew that you could have done the kind of entrepreneur thing or been part of a bigger system.
Mm-hmm.
What is the core difference doing it by yourself? Like,
well, there's more control. There's more flexibility. There was actually a period of time, the first year when I started my network, I had all the big networks trying to actually sign my network. And I did take a deal. And what happened was I was already sold out for the whole year. I took this deal. I thought it was going to be incredible because they had a bigger sales team. They had a huge name. But what happened is I got lost in the sea of other creators. I was not a priority. And then I lost control of doing my own sales. And so for like 6 months, they got like 10% incremental sales. And so I decided that I was going to take that power back. I also didn't like the transparency, and they were kind of old school. There was a lot of stuff like through email, and I thought I could do a much better job. So that's the point in which I was like, okay, I'm going to just recruit other shows that I don't produce and try to help them grow and monetize because I think I could do a better job.
Well, and Jordy, speaking of ad sales, since you're so involved in that part of the business, what do you see as the difference and what keeps you doing it yourself?
Well, I want to piggyback on what Hala was saying. When you are in the weeds of every facet of your business, when you're in the weeds doing all of the sales, learning the language, CPM, what does this mean? You're not having other people do it for you, right? You need to learn it in order to sell it. And you just have such a better understanding of the entire industry once you're able to do those reps. Once you pick up the call, I mean, Dan, I won't say the brand specifically, but I think it was in 2022, you guys gave us our first shot. And I was just literally picking up the phone, Dan, to call you. And you put us on a prove it deal with one of these brands. And I think we knocked it out of the park. I'm not going to say those were your words, but and all of a sudden it opened up an entire new business model for the network of how we can continue to monetize the operation. And if I were to sign with one of these big networky type of things, I wouldn't have had that mentality of I need to figure this out, or that full on understanding of how to actually sell it is what we're making and creating. So that independence has really allowed us to just grab the bull by the horn and just actually understand the business in levels that, I think early on could be nice for a creator to kind of have these big PR departments, these big sales forces and stuff like that. But ultimately, you want to be you want to control your own destination, and you want to understand how the heck these things actually work.
Who's going to sell it better than you?
Exactly.
I think one of the funny things that we've seen also is, we send Jordy to all the kind of ad conventions and everything all across the country. People are always shocked to see Jordy there in person because usually there are network
It's a celeb.
representatives and people there. They're like, what the hell is the host of the show doing here selling ads? But that's how in the weeds that, Jordy is and that we all are with every aspect of the podcast and the business in general.
Dan, back in the day when I was working my marketing job in New York, I had this boss, Steve Stout, brilliant marketing mind. He would say, it was one of his Stoutisms. He said, everybody wants a six pack. Nobody wants to do the crunches. My brothers and I, we love doing the crunches metaphorically, but we love putting in the work every day with all facets of the business, production, editorial, ad sales, you name it, we're doing it.
I've given up on trying to get the six pack, just for the record.
I have to say, so my podcast has like 45 titles now, and I represent all the podcasters I used to look up to in the self-improvement world. And you'd be so surprised. Even the most popular hosts that get millions of downloads have no idea how to monetize their podcast. And so I'm able to come in 2-3x what they were making before. They were signing guarantees, not even knowing how much their podcast was actually worth. And so when you're an independent creator, it forces you to understand how to really monetize every download, and it allows you to really punch above your weight. So I think I make a lot more than other creators my size because I just understand how to properly monetize my show and all the levers you need to pull to maximize your monetization.
Well, and you really, Hala, have been involved, and it's interesting, Brett, because this was your background in the production side. What are the pros and cons of having the burden of having to manage all your own editing and infrastructure, technically?
So the fact that like my own Yap Media team produces my podcast, I mean, I love it. It's like all in one house team. And because I'm the flagship podcast, I'm always a priority. And anything that I do basically to improve my show, I then roll out to my network. Any sort of growth programs that I figure out, like I figured out how to really optimize podcast search optimization on Apple and Spotify, then I just roll that out to my network. And so it allows me to use a lot of the creative marketing budget to grow my show or improve my show. And then any learnings, I can just roll it out to my whole network.
And what about you, Brett? What was it like losing that big studio infrastructure?
Well, I mean, going back to the pros and cons, the pro is that you have complete autonomy over your content, and everything that happens, whether it's a success or a failure, falls on you. The con is the same exact thing. It's that the success and failure falls on you. And that's a lot of pressure. But not being in that studio framework also gives you an autonomy like nothing else, where you could be nimble. I worked at the Ellen DeGeneres Show, and I worked for companies, with big staffs and a big hierarchy where you constantly had to wait for approvals. And was that the right edit? And is that color of the graphic the right color? And you get so in the minutia of things and so lost in that. And there are so many people giving their opinions that something that could have been out in the world and you could have been on to the next project ends up taking way longer, when the way we do it is once we're satisfied as brothers, it's out in the world and we get to move on to the next thing. And that really is a liberating thing that I don't think that exists so much in other industries, especially, I came from film and TV, and I was working in film development where there's something called development hell, where you're working on projects and you have a whole slate of upcoming TV shows and movies that you're doing, 99% of which will never be made. And you're going back and forth with studios on notes. And there's an instant gratification to running a network by yourself and doing podcasting that is so in people's ears in an instant, and doing stuff about current events that is just so unique. And it also kind of gives you that hit of kind of adrenaline because you're getting that instant feedback from your viewers. So you're also able to pivot in real time. This worked great. This didn't work great. Let's do more of that. Let's do less of this. And that's been really helpful in just evolving and growing.
Both of your groups have had a lot of recent success getting some pretty big name guests. I just saw you did something with Mr. Wonderful, and I know you've had a lot of other people on. And I looked the other day, you guys had Hakeem Jeffries, and like you got a lot of people showing up now. How hard was it to get people to take your call and take the time to come and be on your show? Do you remember the breakthrough on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, from the start, I always had like a really high expectation, and I knew that it was a volume game. And so when I first started, I made a list of like 100 people that I wanted on my show, and I shot for the stars, and 2 people said yes. So then I took those 2 people, and then I mentioned to the next people, like, hey, so and so, it was like Dr. Jack Schaefer and Dory Clark said they, like, are coming on my show. Will you come on my show? And then by like, episode 8, I had Chris Voss, and I just always had big guests because I didn't settle, and I knew that it was just a volume game. Someone's going to say yes. Even Gary Vee goes on smaller shows and tries to support. So there are people who just want to support other shows. And so if you just, have high expectations, do a lot of reach out, you can secure them.
The entire industry at all facets is incredibly humbling. I'm not going to say I keep score of who said no to us early on from coming on the show, but I definitely keep score of who said no to us early on. I don't hold any grudges, but I definitely remember. It's a pro and con about being, in the independent space there, is because we do all our own outreach. And so I know who on the teams to reach out to. And I've established now we all have established great relationships with these folks and could get anybody on the show now that wants to come on. That wasn't always the case back in 2021 or 2022. You're just cold emailing, trying to find the right contact, just picking up the phone, making calls. Hey, do you know this person, someone that might be interested in coming? It was difficult.
We'll get an email from a governor, and Jordy will be like, "Oh, now he wants to come on the show." Okay, I see.
Okay, let's talk about starting on the MeidasTouch side. You're dealing with some really delicate subject matter, especially today, right? Now more than ever, but like truly. Trust in institutions has basically collapsed. New media has a lot of trust. And, watching this and being kind of a part of supporting the new media ecosystem, it's been interesting to see the advantages of not having all those filters and all those guards and all those kind of corporate interests putting their thumb on the scale for what you talk about. But I also think there's another side to it that I want you to address. What are those challenges and struggles for you talking about some of the news items you're doing without all of the infrastructure and fact checkers? And, how do you think about that weight and that responsibility to make sure that what you're doing doesn't just get clicks and reach, but really has vetting that people can trust?
Well, the truth is we take it very seriously, and we've built up over the past couple of years an editorial team and a team of contributors who are always checking facts and checking everything that we do. And we root really all of our content, even though it's political and about politics, and everything is obviously crazy and so polarizing right now. But I think the benefit of us being brothers on the show is we get to root it in our family, and we get to root it in, we try to frame it all as the world as we see it, rather than, a left versus right, Democratic versus Republican sort of thing. And so I think that grounding of us as brothers and us in between talking about really serious issues, me making fun of Jordy a little bit or Jordy making fun of, I think that kind of brother banter adds to it, and it brings something else to the show that's a little different than just a political show where we're ranting at people or ranting and raving and trying to get clicks or anything like that. So I think that's become an important part of it, but it is a big responsibility. And we have seen so many people in the space who do opt to try to go, okay, let's go all in on this conspiracy theory because this is what's hot right now. And we made a concerted effort to make sure that we don't go anywhere near that. Everything that we're going to do, we're going to back it up with things. One of the kind of catchphrases of the show that we've developed over time is our older brother Ben always says, play the clip. And then we'll play the clip of whatever we're talking about. And for the first while, I was like, Ben, we have editors. You don't have to say play the clip. Like, they'll play the clip when the clip is supposed to be played. But it became just a thing, and now it's become a saying because of that. It's like, okay, now let me show you the receipts is kind of the, what he's getting at when he says that.
And in terms of just like, so how, and what do you do if you think about the things that like, the Times or the Post or the Journal have to do, like, do you do retractions? Like, how do you think about like journalistic practices and implementing that?
Oh yeah. If we get something wrong on an episode, in the next episode, we'll say, by the way, we screwed up on that issue or that issue. It's actually this, but we really vet everything pretty thoroughly before we go out with something and say it out loud. It's an important thing for us.
Yeah, and look, it may feel intimate, right? That we're like this small, upstart, scrappy, three brothers. The reality is, because of where we are now, we've grown our team very large. So we have editorial, we do have fact checkers on the staff. We have, tons of different producers, written producers that run our website. And so we have a full-blown team that we've been able to develop to keep us honest on these things too, and make sure that we're staying up to date. And the authenticity of it, which I think might be a little bit of a marketing buzzword these days, but you have to stay authentic to yourselves and you have to stay authentic to the mission. I always say people will inevitably let you down, but if you root yourselves in your North Star in truth and facts and showing people the receipts by playing the clip, that's a good place to point your North Star at. And I really believe that our viewers who, very pleasantly refer to themselves as the Meidas Mighty really appreciate the way we deliver the news and the receipts that we come with every day.
We had Bernie Sanders on the show, this Senator Bernie Sanders, and he said something when he was a guest on our show that actually really stuck with me. And what he had said is, he said, guys, sometimes the most important stories that people are overlooking are the stories that are right in front of your face. And that's what the media often overlooks as they're trying to do deep dives and investigative pieces and things like that. And I internalized it because I think that is so much of what our network is rooted in. These are the stories that are happening in front of us. This is what this person said. Let us show you what this person said. Let us show you what that person said. Let me show you what's happening here. Let me show you what's happening here. And we'll give you our opinions on it, of course, but it's going to be based in us showing you what is happening rather than us trying to conjure up something, which is why the playing in the clip is so important to us.
Hala, when I think about the parallel in your business, I think about my time in advertising sales in my prior career and just the responsibility of talking to small business owners, right? And people that are, they've got all of their heart and their soul into these ventures and, their kids' college tuition and all that. And like where you guide them has real consequences, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that responsibility for the content that you're creating in addition to the whole ad piece?
Yeah. I mean, I take my content like super seriously. Like my number one client is my listener. And I'm always trying to think of like, how can I make this meaningful for the listener? How can I make this improve their lives? What kind of guests do I need to bring on that's actually going to educate them? And so we are really selective in terms of who we bring on, what we say on the show, and then also what advertisers we bring on. My show is always sold out. I have 6 brands per show, and I really want to make sure I'm endorsing products, especially since my show is a business show, that I actually use, that I actually like, so that my listeners don't waste their money on brands that don't work for them.
And Hala, you interestingly, you have a killer track record of advertisers, without exception, exceeding their goals. Which is, I don't know if anybody can really fully get their head around what that means. That you literally bat 1,000 in our experience. That's not a normal thing. What do you chalk that up to?
Well, I was saying that my number one client is my listener. My second client is my advertisers. And I take that really seriously. And I think I take that a lot more seriously than other podcasters, which means that I won't sell things that I know won't convert. So for example, I pioneered monthly flights in the industry. Before I did that, and I think a lot of people even at Oxford can attest, everything was sold episodically. So people would buy ads, per episode. That's what that means. I didn't think that worked. And I thought that things needed to be repeated in order for listeners to really understand the product and actually take action, because podcasts are really top of funnel. And so I would only sell monthly flights, and I put my foot down on that. Performance skyrocketed for me and for all my podcasts. On top of that, I gave incentives. If you buy a monthly flight, we'll add some added value so I can make sure that we hit performance. So that might be email newsletters or an Instagram post or a LinkedIn, post, just depending on where, our creators get the most value or the most impressions for what they're posting. So monthly flights, added value, doing extra things, like especially, for example, I love to get sponsored by clothing brands, but my show is a business podcast. And so I know I have to work a little bit harder to keep those clothing brands happy. So that means I'll do Instagram reels for free just to keep those brands happy. So doing the added value.
We're going to talk about your values in a minute.
Okay.
Your track record's not too shabby, but I want to stay with Hala for a second because perfect is hard to beat. I just want to say back to you and for the audience that is here and the audience that's going to hear that in the future, what a critical point of differentiation that is for a creator. If you go and buy a show, when there's somewhere there's a party going on tonight and somebody's going to pitch a show there and they want you to test it if you're an advertiser and they're going to tell you how exciting it is, once in a lifetime, come get in the front. And they're going to give you a lot of razzle dazzle. And you're going to take your money and you're going to put it in that show. And the show may work and it may not work. And then you're going to find out what next. It didn't work. Are they going to say pound sand? Are they going to say, well, we'll try to give you a few extra impressions? Or are they going to go so far with their own inventory that they're going to say, I'm going to run additional media until you get to your goal? And I think that's what Hala's talking about. And I just want to underscore the fact that you can't get that everywhere. You don't get that level of commitment through the usual suspects. That is not the corporate way. And so, go ahead and pile on, but I think that's...
Yeah, I think the other thing to notice, so I have a podcast network as well. And so because I want to keep this reputation of having a perfect score and doing a good job, I'm actually really selective with who I bring on. And so I look at all of their downloads, where are their downloads coming from? Are they bloat downloads? Are they fake downloads? I'm looking at their engagement on social, on YouTube, and I'm trying to make sure that they actually have a real audience that's going to convert. And I'll cut podcasters that get a lot of cancellations because I don't want that to hurt our reputation. So It's not only me thinking about how I can make sure that my show does well, it's also like, how do I make it mandatory for my creators to do the things that I do that I know work?
So moving back to the MeidasTouch side of this conversation, your business may hold the record for the most success stories in terms of volume. And, I'm not usually involved in the deals we do with our partners directly because we've got a really, wonderful team that leads this industry in that way. But it was sort of the way that we met with MeidasTouch was Jordy and I were put together by a friend, and I saw an opportunity and I reached out to him, and he was eager to not just get the money, but to make us successful and to build a partnership. And I remember being like, okay, Jordy, this thing needs to work. And we don't have any assurance that just because you're going to get 1 million impressions or whatever, that's necessarily going to get successful. And I need you to put your name on it, that you're going to figure out how to get them over the goal. Because that first impression with the advertiser is everything. They're not going to come back if you screw them. And so, do you remember this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so talk about what that's like on your side of the table.
I think a lot like Hala is we don't have an ego when it comes to our advertisers and our brands. We definitely want to vet them, make sure their audience aligned, but we also need the relationship to work for them if we want them to come back. The money will come later. What you have to focus on is establishing that relationship, the relationship with your brand, the relationship with your audience, and making sure there's mutual respect between the two. If you're bringing on brands that are in direct conflict with your audience, it's never going to convert, to your point. And so why waste your time? Why go for a quick money grab that ruins that authenticity that I was talking about earlier with your audience? And now your audience is all upset. You have to find the right relationships, and you have to put your ego aside, especially early on in the ad sales game, because you want the relationships in the business to work. The industry, what I've found out, another pro and con of how we got started here, is that it's it's so small, it's so tight knit, it's so familial that one person might leave this buying group, go to this buying group who you worked with on this buying group. And so you always have to maintain these relationships. You never want to be the jerk that just says no and puts their foot down and seems immovable. You want to figure out, hey, how can I make this work for this buying group and this brand if I want them to come back and service my audience in a way that's actually helpful? We vet our brands incredibly well, just like you, Hala. And I agree with you. It is so important that that mutual respect exists in order for that long-term success to take place.
Yeah, I'd like to add something else. It's also important as a creator to actually help your brand. So sometimes I'll get talk points and I'm like, I don't even understand what this is. My audience is not going to understand what this is. And so I take it upon myself to go on their website, to try out the product and think about, as a marketer, how can I communicate this? Like, what do I need to tell my audience about this so they actually understand what this is, and so that it moves the needle for the brand?
Totally.
So do you, kind of a layup, but if you were going through an agent or one of the majors, like, do you think that you would still be able to have that level of accountability that you offer the brand? Do you think that can come with?
So, like, if I signed to some big network or something like this? Yeah, I mean, I think that's up to the creator. I think creators themselves have the power to do a good commercial read, but I just think there would probably be a lack of education or knowledge to actually know what moves the needle. So unless, like, for me, I'm always educating my podcasters and telling them, like, this is what we have to do in order for us to get annuals and renewals, and this is mandatory because it's going to actually help you make more money. I don't think I would get that same guidance or have the experience to know what to do.
And do you think that since both of your programs are really accountable to your advertisers in a kind of that extra way, do you have to be extra discerning? Do you have to say no more to money that you could get on the front end because you're not sure it's going to win?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've had to cut bait with partners mid-campaign because the values and ethos of the brand ultimately didn't align to what we originally thought they were. And it was a tough business decision, because we use our sponsors to fund the operation, to fund those 40, 50 plus creators and editors and staff that I talked about before. It's never an easy decision when you have to, let someone go like that. But again, if it's in direct conflict with your audience, there's no point in keeping them on. You're just going to hurt yourself, your credibility, and potentially lose out on more brands going forward.
And to Hala's point, I'm sorry to interrupt. You were talking about these long-term flights and the importance of trying to get people on so that you could build that trust with them, because if it's a one and done sort of situation, they might not get that relationship with your audience. And so it's like, what's even the point? So you want to make sure it's the right fit with the brand. You want to make sure the campaign is starting with the right test length, because if it's not long enough, they may not see the return right away and they might not understand it. I find it's probably easy for most people at a certain point to get a quick buck and see, oh, I could get X amount of dollars with this brand or that brand. But what's the point if you get that quick buck and then they never come back? And so that's why it's so important that you're figuring out all those different variables and are making sure that they're exactly kind of the way you want them to be. And they may not all work out, but you want to put your best foot forward, because to me, there's no point in getting that quick money if it means that it's going to ruin your reputation and you're not going to have those brands come back. It's to me, what's the point? I'm always thinking long term, what's best for the success of the relationship with the brand, our audience, and the network as a whole. What's going to be for the right thing for our employees, and making sure that this is a long-term success and not just a short-term hit.
Well, I think it's kind of just like from the buy side. It's the difference between working with like a mom and pop versus working with a big corporate brand that has a corporate policy that they have to adhere to, right? Like, they're not going to be able to make as many exceptions, even if they want to, or they technically could. To make it through all the layers just takes more time, right? So what I wonder is, you've all reached a certain level of success where if you wanted to, you could take the check. You could give up a lot of your independence and make life a little bit easier on yourselves. What keeps you from doing it today? And is there anything that would ever change that?
I think I make more money being independent.
Yeah.
I think I'll always make more money being independent because
you're in it for life.
Yeah, I'm gonna be. I mean, one day it might be old and profiting, but yeah, I'm gonna be podcasting. I think till I retire.
Yeah, I think we definitely couldn't get to where we were without the independence. There would be way too much in the way. And I think, what a lot of people often forget about kind of our origin story is in the beginning, we were just people would invite us to be guests on their podcast because of the videos we would do on social media. And then some folks from SiriusXM had hit us up at the time. I'm talking, this is back like 2020. And they said, do you want a show on our SiriusXM progress station? And we did it. We got paid $0. My wife thought I was nuts. I asked her, do you think you could support us for a little bit? She reluctantly said, I guess. and and the issue with that is we had zero idea about anything that was going on. The numbers were opaque. We had no idea if one person was listening to us or a billion people were listening to us. We had no sense of money or economics or anything. And so when we did that for a few months, Sirius had spoke, and they were great. I'm not saying anything bad about them at all, but they wanted us to continue with them. And at that point, we realized we're not going to be able to do this if we don't have a feel for what the audience is thinking, what the numbers are, how this all works. We need to do it ourselves or this isn't going to work. And so we all took it in-house, and that was the best decision, we ever made. I don't think we would ever, be part of like a podcast network or something, because we are the podcast network. As far as taking investors or something in the future, I'm always open to something like that. But as far as having like a network telling me what to do and how the podcast should work and what advertisers we need to be, it's not a space I want to be in, but I don't knock, anybody for deciding that's best for them, if.
So we're running low on time, but I want to just hear from all of you, what is the truly hardest, most painful part of maintaining your independence? What is the cost that maybe most people don't consider?
It's really hard to think of like what is like the biggest challenge of maintaining your independence. I think if I can like flip that just a little bit, I think the biggest challenge is helping other podcasters realize that, signing with a network, actually the incentives are like I'm talking about like a corporate network. The incentives are often misaligned. Like, for example, guarantees are not made in the podcaster's benefit. And when you sign for a guarantee, essentially, the company just has to hit a certain point, and once they hit that certain point, they're not that incentivized to keep selling for you, or they'll run programmatic ads, pre-recorded ads that are not good for your listeners and have a low CPM. So I think it's about educating creators why joining a more indie podcast network is actually to their incentive, and they'll probably make a lot more money and have a lot more success that route.
Nice. For me personally, your energy is finite. And so there's only so many hours in the day. We're lucky. We're brothers. We're inherently a team. There's 3 of us. If one of us gets tired, the other one can pick up the slack. That's incredibly helpful, especially early on. So I'm not going to downplay that. The consistency of truly wanting to be great in this field is the most exhausting part. Every single day, we have every 90 minutes, we have an episode or a video on YouTube coming out every single day without fail. We're up until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Pacific time sometimes, and I get up at 6 a.m. Eastern to pick up the slack. I mean, the consistency is maniacal, and it might drive you crazy. But if you build a good team around you, it's all worth it, and you're passionate about what you do, it's all worth it.
Here's the thing. When I work for a company, when I work for a show, you know that when you clock out, you're done with work. You know that when that vacation period comes around, you could put away your laptop, you could shut down your email, you don't have to talk to anybody. It's not the case when you run your own show or your own business. You have to be doing everything at all times. And that's obviously difficult for a whole variety of reasons. If you always have to be on, you have, family members, we all have young kids, we have our wives, just balancing that becomes a difficult thing, because if you want it to be a success, you have to treat it like the full-time job that it is and not like a hobby. And I feel like a lot of people going, oh, I'll do a podcast, I'll release it every Wednesday, I'll record the show, I'll be done, that'll be it. It's not going to succeed if that's your mindset. It's got to kind of be all, in my experience, all consuming.
And just to put it this way, Dan, I know we're wrapping up. Ben's not here because he doesn't love you. He's literally filming an episode right now in the hotel room. That's the reason why.
He's holding the fort down.
Yeah, exactly. Holding it down for us.
But this may not be our last time seeing the three of you, and maybe a fourth today. And I just want to remind everybody, if it's not already on your radar, in the spirit of recognizing independence and kind of the themes we've been talking about here, we are launching an award show specifically to honor the independent podcasters and creators. And you can even feel kind of the vibe shift in the room a little bit. Things are getting a little more serious. It's our first time doing it. We don't know how it's going to go, but we know we got some great people showing up to contribute, like this wonderful panel. Please thank Brett, Jordy, and Hala for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you to Hala, Jordy, and Brett. And even though Ben, the third brother, wasn't there, he was there in spirit and was actually with us later in the night for the awards event. So thankful to all of you for joining this conversation. Thank you to Podcast Movement Evolutions for creating the space for us to partner with you and make all this happen. And if you took anything away from this, I hope it's just that independence is not just like a cool term. It's a sacrifice, it's a decision, and it's a whole different way of life. And it's not to say that you should, not work with the institutions and the big platforms and the big networks. We know you're going to do that, and we're going to keep doing that. But it's really, really important that any healthy creator and podcast diet includes a healthy balance of independence. And what you're going to find is that that's where you get most of your nutrients, because these things work really hard. And today was just further proof of why that is. So this podcast is still brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in this medium. We want you to use your influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify. You can build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion across the most important topics of our age. That's one of the wonderful things about being part of this medium and this ecosystem. If you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, check us out. Give us a look. It's all at oxfordroad.com. We have a really nice newsletter. It's called The Influencer. It comes out every week. It's free, and you can sign up for it when you go to our website. If you don't like it, do me a favor. Tell us why. What can we do better? info@MediaRoundtable.com. We always like your feedback. Special thanks to Haley, Bianca, Rocio, Kyle, Ezra, Paulina, Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.